Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we are back tonight for our final show of 2024. As we look at the year that was in Birdland, we'll talk about some of the highlights, some of the lowlights, and some of the fun stuff that happened in the past year. And we'll also talk about the big news of the last few days is that Corbin Burnes has signed with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So the Orioles now going to figure out how they're going to fill that hole at the top of their rotation. We'll talk about all of that on tonight's episode of Orioles on the Verge, which is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to welcome a new member to our Patreon community. We have one person who got in just before 2024 wrapped up, and it looks like, judged by the timing, maybe this was a Christmas present for themselves. And for that shout out, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, welcome Todd, who signed up at the AAA level. Really appreciate it. Yeah, AAA right out of the jump. You're banging on the door to the majors. So thanks a lot, Todd. I hope you enjoy the content.
I should mention, too, that in the coming days, patrons will get the first episode of our Top 50 Prospects Countdown. Bob, Nick, and I finalized our collective Top 50 over the holidays, and we're going to be releasing that one player a day starting not long after the New Year. So sometime the first week of January, we will have prospect number 50 for you, and we'll continue to move forward. And, of course, if the Orioles trade from that list during the offseason, as they have in each of the last two offseasons, we will make that update. And chances are we're going to have to make it because the Orioles lost their ace officially right not long after Christmas as Corbin Burnes signs a 6-year contract with the Arizona Diamondbacks that includes an opt-out after the second year. And I think that the end result of Burnes going somewhere else was not surprising. The Orioles acquired him when he was going into his walk year, and it was seen all along that this was probably a one-year rental. You look to get the most out of that 1 year that you can get. Burnes and his performance delivered as expected. He gave them a great start in the postseason. Unfortunately, the Orioles couldn't get any more than that as they were bounced by the Kansas City Royals in a 2-game sweep. And while Burnes was on the market long enough to create some speculation that maybe he would return to Baltimore, and reports that have emerged in the recent days suggest that the Orioles were in on Burnes in a competitive way, we don't really know exactly what the Orioles had to offer. So not really in a position tonight to compare what the Orioles did or did offer Burnes compared to what he's getting from the Diamondbacks, which will include a $210 million guarantee over those 6 years. So, Nick, I'll start with you here. I think that we kind of knew all along that this was going to happen. He was going to sign somewhere else. And the Diamondbacks, where Burnes lives out in Arizona, were willing to come up with a good offer, and he took it. Without knowing what the Orioles did or didn't do in their negotiations, what are your thoughts on this development?
You're not going to get any hot takes from me on this one. I'm kind of just done thinking about Corbin Burnes, to be honest, and reading the lovely takes. I'm happy for Burnes. I'm happy for his family. I'm happy for the Diamondbacks. I'm stoked for Diamondbacks fans. They, as usual, have a pretty fun team out there. I will be watching. I enjoy watching late night baseball. Wife and kids go to bed, have a beer, sit back, relax, throw on a West Coast game, and Diamondbacks might be my team next year. But the longer he remained on the market, I think we talked about this last episode. Like the longer he remained on the market, the more optimistic I was getting about Burnes coming back. But that's my own doing. That wasn't any reporting. That wasn't anything concrete. That was just me in the offseason wanting Corbin Burnes back in an Orioles uniform. It was pretty clear. It seems like that there was one team he wanted to pitch for, and he waited, and he got it, and it's good for him. I've always kind of assumed, as we've been talking about all off season in these episodes, I've always kind of assumed that it's going to be the trade. How you're going to get this top of the rotation arm, it's going to be via trade because Blake Snell was never going to be an Oriole. If Max Fried wants to go have a second Tommy John surgery with the Yankees, go for it. But Burns, maybe there's a slight risk, but like that was your top three. So like if you want a true full-blown ace, it was always going to be via the trade. And I know you don't want to keep trading for rentals. You don't want to deplete the farm system, right? But for now, I think that's okay. I'm not concerned at the moment. If we're hopping on here mid-February and Sagano is being hyped up as the number 2 guy because he had a really good, camp, then I'm going to blow an aneurysm. But until then, I just don't think there's a reason to right now. It's the Orioles. I feel confident the Orioles are going to get their top of the line pitcher. It's like we mentioned before, the Burns trade last year happened in February. It would be nice if they wrap this up sooner, but I was never expecting. I don't think anybody was really expecting Burns to come back. So for him to go to Arizona, I'm glad it wasn't Boston. I'm glad it wasn't the Yankees or even the Mets. Not too concerned about it, to be honest.
Yeah, the second we traded for Corbin Burns, I think everyone expected him to be a 1-year rental. You're going for it before he hits free agency and takes a huge offer from the Dodgers, Yankees, et cetera, et cetera. And like Nick said, obviously, the longer it was dragging out and the Yankees got their pitcher and the Dodgers got their pitchers, it was like, okay, maybe there's a chance he comes back here. Sounded like it was between us, the Giants, and the Blue Jays, but really he was just trying to get Arizona involved. They finally did, and he took their offer. So it was never going to happen. I'm sure the Orioles knew that. I love how the whole discourse is, wow, the Orioles wasted all their time on Corbin Burns when they should have known it was never going to sign here. Like they'd just been sitting there waiting for Corbin Burns to call before they turn around and investigate any other pitchers that are on the trade market or free agency. We know this front office always has plan after plan after plan. If this happens, we can do this. If this doesn't happen, we can target this person. Like Nick said, not worried in the least that the Orioles are not going to go out and get at least another middle of the rotation arm, whether it's Jack Flaherty in free agency, whether it's a Pablo Lopez trade or Zach Gallen, which we've been pushing. I don't know if it is more or less likely now that the Diamondbacks got Burns, but you want to throw us Jordan Montgomery and Zach Gallen for Dean Kramer and some other stuff, then we're listening. But yeah, we're going to get a pitcher. And I mean, we'll get to it. Worst Orioles takes a little bit later, but this fan base is gotten really spoiled really fast. But yeah, I think good for Burns. Got what he wanted. Surprised he didn't get more, to be honest with you. But I think it's a good deal for all involved.
On a recent episode, we broke down Gallen as a trade option. I was curious to see if you guys think tonight that that's still a realistic possibility because on one hand, the Diamondbacks clearly are going for it if they're signing Corbin Burns, but it doesn't change the fact that Zach Gallen is in his contract here. And the Burns signing may or may not reduce the Diamondbacks' ability to keep him around. So do you think that that's is still a realistic option, or have your thoughts started to turn elsewhere?
My thoughts have turned elsewhere. It does make sense because Arizona still has holes offensively that they can fill, and the Orioles can help fill some of those holes. But if I'm Arizona, if this was completely unexpected and out of left field, then if I'm Arizona, I'm rejoicing right now. And I'm going to hold on to Zach Gallen at least until, the trade deadline when, we can say, all right, if we got some more younger pitchers really taking a step forward, if, Eduardo Rodriguez can ever stay healthy for them and he's pitching well and you're feeling good and you have some major holes offensively, then you maybe make that move. But I've got my eyes on some other guys right now, to be honest, but it's with me, like, I don't know. My biggest issue with all of this isn't the Corbin Burns going elsewhere. It's not them signing the big free agent. It's honestly, for me, kind of derailing the question there, but it's their lack of activity in like that mid-tier market, right? It's Manaya's gone, Kikuchi's gone, Evaldi's gone. It's like we're gonna have to pretty much not to open this box. We can just leave it at this. But like settling for Jack Flaherty, like I'm fine with, but like it wasn't my ideal offseason. But that's where my frustration and annoyance is at. But yeah, it's still a lot of attractive options, some of which I think I'm going to bring up in some of our takes conversation later on, but still a lot of very attractive options that aren't they're not going to break this farm system by having to trade for them this offseason.
Yeah, I don't think I'm not ruling it out just because I feel like if they really want to get out of the Jordan Montgomery contract, shed some payroll because they're paying Corbin Burns and redistributing it somewhere else, then maybe Gallen could be ahead, or maybe another pitcher, maybe someone else along the lines, or maybe they're just going to get rid of Jordan Montgomery for free. And I would only take him if you're getting something else better out of it. So I've kind of turned my attention more to the Pablo Lopez that's dangling out there for the Twins. I'll be curious to see what that would take if you could get him for a package centered around Heston Kjerstad, and then maybe Anthony Santander's market creeps down to 3-year deal, and if I think all things are equal, I would imagine he'd want to come back here over anywhere else. But it's between Pablo Lopez and Shane Baz for me. I think are the guys I'm like got my hopes up that we could trade for, and I still wouldn't mind. I'm looking for the name. The guy that was a Phillies reliever that's kind of getting looks as a starter. Is it Jeff Hoffman?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would not mind trading for someone and then signing him where he can do either or. He could try to turn him into a starter, or at the very least, was a great reliever the past few years. So that would be the way. Excuse me, I went.
I'm down for Hoffman, but as a bullpen piece, as insurance for Felix Bautista, because that is scaring me. As we're getting close to the season, that is scaring me as well. Like, what version of Felix Bautista are we going to get? How dominant is he going to be coming off Tommy John surgery? So I like that deal, but I wouldn't want him as a starter, I don't think.
Yeah, I understand the logic of that, and we've seen some teams do it. The Braves did it last year with Ronaldo Lopez, and you sign a reliever, you move him to you sign a reliever and you move him to the rotation to see what you can get. As I've said before, I'm not concerned with the 3 through 5 or the 3 through 7 options that the Orioles have right now. I'm concerned about the top. And I just don't know that Jeff Hoffman resolves that. I would be fine, though, and actually would be very happy with him as the bullpen option, like Nick said. And maybe if you feel like things are good with Felix Bautista, you look at moving Hoffman into that role, or you give him a 2-year deal, and next year you put him in the rotation. I would be fine with a situation like that, but I don't think you need more mid to back end rotation depth right now. I think you got to really worry about that spot at the top. And, some of the names we've rattled off already, Pablo Lopez is certainly an option. Dylan Cease, I have to think that if Dylan Cease actually is available, that the Orioles are at least kicking the tires there. The point is, though, that there's no shortage of options on the trade market. And Nick, you're absolutely right. If they're in February talking about Sagano as their number 2, I will be on here tearing them to shreds for that. But it's December 30th. There is still time in the offseason.
Yeah. And even like you're even hearing now more and more reports, like Framber Valdez, for example, guys who are, they're not on the market anymore. The odds of them being shopped are next to nothing at this point. I don't believe that. Like, it's December 30th as we're recording this right now. Those reports are coming out 2 weeks ago.
That doesn't sound like Dylan Cease a year ago at all.
I know. Like, there's still dominoes to fall. Roki Sasaki, like, yeah, if he goes to the Padres, Dylan Cease could become much more expendable for the Padres, who need some more offensive help. They have a lot of holes to fill, specifically in the outfield. The Orioles could be attractive to them. But Sasaki could throw a curveball and sign somewhere crazy, which causes more dominoes to fall. Like there's still that'd be amazing. Then conversation over. We're done. But no, like there's still more dominoes that need to fall and could open up more trade opportunities. But yeah, you look around, there are some very attractive options out there that the Orioles can target. And there is, of course, always the unknown, that it's going to be the guy that we weren't expecting, that we haven't mentioned, that Locked On Orioles hasn't mentioned, that no Orioles podcast has mentioned, and then the Orioles come out of left field with this random name, and we're like, holy crap, that's cool. Like, I don't know. I don't have notifications on for anybody because nothing is that important. But when the Jeff Passanbaum does hit and everybody else gets a notification, and then I see it like 5 minutes later, I'm going to be stoked to jump on here on this emergency podcast and talk about that name. And I hope it is someone that we haven't even talked about up to this point to make it even more fun.
Yeah, I just refuse to believe that. I mean, the front office knows what the team needs better than anybody. If they didn't feel like they had a myriad of options still to go ahead and get that guy, then I think they would have tried to jump on someone earlier. I don't know. But to me, I doubt they're panicking. I think they're comfortable that they'll get their guy in the end, and so am I.
Is
until
this
proven otherwise?
Yeah. Is this we get to the end of year stuff, but is this we haven't talked like 2 weeks about all this. Do you guys think this is more so like, because there are even some very smart, knowledgeable fans who I respect their takes, I respect their opinions. They're starting to get very frustrated and voice their frustrations in a way that, I haven't seen them do that before. And I get it. I fully understand it. I don't agree with a lot of it, but I fully get it. But do we think a lot of more of this is just because it is the Yankees being so aggressive because they lost a generational player? It's the Red Sox making big moves, who we've said numerous times, we're scared to death of the Red Sox this offseason. No one's concerned about the Blue Jays. There will always be the bridesmaids very clearly this offseason again.
Can't give away their Canadian money.
Do we think that's like, if this was, other team, if this was the Twins and whoever else, like NL team is making all these moves, do we think the noise would be a little bit lower, or no?
Personally, I do. I do think it's the Red Sox and Yankees have made a lot of moves, and like we talked about a week or two ago, they might still be a worse team than they were last year, but they're doing things and they're doing a bunch of stuff to get the headlines. And I just think people are underrating what this team, the talent on this team, was sitting at before we even got Tyler O'Neill, Gary Sanchez, and Sugano. So yeah, I just think it's, and like you said, I get it. Like, it's frustrating to watch your rivals make all these moves and you're like, come on, Orioles, do something. But at the same time, we still have a month and a half before pitchers and catchers report. So, but to answer your question, yeah.
Yeah, I do think that there's some anxiety there because of the Yankees and Red Sox. And I maintain that I think the Yankees are kind of going with an approach of building a roster by volume and not really focusing a whole lot on quality, but maybe that'll work for them. We'll see. The Red Sox, I think they've had a fantastic offseason. And yeah, they do scare me more going into next year. But I also think that there's, and I'll get into this later on with the year in review stuff, but I think that there's still a hangover from the playoff loss in the second half, and people are just looking for things to basically validate how they feel about the Orioles after that crash in the second half and in the playoffs, where it's like, all right, this whole thing under Mike Elias was too good to be true. It's all crashing down, and look, there's another sign of it. I think that there is an element of that creeping in right now, but the Red Sox and Yankees being aggressive definitely has not helped.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find it, but John Shepard on Blue Sky had a tweet or post that really spoke to me and what I'm seeing. And if I could just, Miguel Castro goes to the Astros, breaking news. Let's see as I try to find him. Great podcasting. Anyway, he said he's never seen a fan base turn on a front office that has gone from it's a skeet. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. He's never seen a fan base turn on a front office that had a miraculous rebuild turnaround in 3 years that no one thought was possible, is coming off of 2 playoff appearances back-to-back, averaging 96 wins the past 2 seasons, and now calling for his head. And it's just weird how people have turned on Mike Elias and company. almost like they were waiting for an opportunity to do so. But yeah, it's frustrating.
And we'll move on now to our year in review. And this is an episode we do every year, and we have a lot of fun with it. We take a look back at the year that was in Birdland, and we talk about some of the highlights, talk about some of the lowlights, and we look ahead to 2025 and talk about some of the things we're looking forward to next year for the Orioles, for the organization as a whole, and for this podcast. And I'll start with the first question, which is, what was the greatest gift from the O's in 2024? And I'll start with Bob.
I mean, it sounds like some fans are starting to sour on this already, but to me, it's the new ownership. I mean, it was a little bit less than a year ago. We heard the news, the reports were breaking in January of 2024 that David Rubenstein and company were buying the Orioles. It became official before opening day. We've already seen the fruits of someone being willing to spend money at the trade deadline when they took on salary with Zach Eflin, Eloy Jimenez, and the competitive offer, whatever you want to look at it, with Corbin Burns. Again, that's new. So whenever you have a front office that was already killing it and now they have a bigger wallet to play with, a bigger budget, then I think that is a huge gift. And I think we have yet to see the fruits of that, but it's coming.
Since we are a minor league show, this has a major league taste to it as well, but I went more minor leagues and just said pitching development. It's weird to say this, as you know, people are now threatening to become Yankees fans if we sign Jack Flaherty. But I think we've been pounding this table for years now. And early on, people saw Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall, and then like nothing else, right? You even had Orioles state-run media go rogue off script and say the Orioles don't get credit for developing Kyle Bradish. They didn't get credit for developing Yennier Cano. They get 100% of that credit for developing those two guys. So many people think because the Orioles don't draft pitchers in the first round that they don't have pitching prospects. It's all false. It's old man on message board yelling at clouds energy. Don't agree with it at all. I do fully agree that we need to see more of these guys reach the major leagues. I'm like the homegrown guys, the drafted guys, and they're coming. The international guys. It takes time for these guys to bubble up. But like Cade Povich pitched well last year. We'll see what he does in year two. Chase McDermott is right there, ready to make an impact next year, hopefully, if these back injuries can subside, if he can stay healthy and hopefully make an impact next year. Guys like Cameron Weston, Trey Gibson, Michael Fritt, the names we've talked about over and over and over again, like if they take that next leap in their development, like, we'll see if they can do that next year. But I just think the foundation is incredibly strong. They have proven that they can make tweaks and adjustment to older guys at the major league level and turn them into bona fide studs and reliable, valuable pieces for this organization. You're starting to see more of the prospects bubble up. There's so many pitchers in this organization on the minor league side that no one's ever heard of. Guys like Nestor Herman getting tabbed as a top 100 level prospect. Levi Wells, the surface level numbers look awful, but you break it down, as I did over on Substack a couple of days ago, some of the best stuff plus numbers in all of minor league baseball. Juan Nunez getting nabbed in the Rule 5 draft, even though he hasn't pitched above high A. Other teams raiding this farm system, even the hurt guys like Zach Peak and Gene Pinto. Moises Chase and Jackson Baumeister getting a ton of credit in their new organizations. The Orioles built Moises Chase into who he is now. Now he's going to be considered, he's probably going to be a top 100 prospect for the Phillies. I was listening to a national fantasy podcast today, and they were hyping up Moises Chase, which is awesome. Like, I don't know. I just feel like this was the first year, and now you start seeing the national scene, national guys really give this organization credit for what they're doing on the pitching side of things. And it's been really cool to see personally, just because that's a take that we've stood by for so long, and we're seeing this finally come to fruition in this organization.
Yeah, but Kyle Bradish is the obvious one, but to me, the one that doesn't ever get mentioned when it comes to the Orioles pitching development, Felix Bautista.
Yeah.
Going into 2021, nobody knew who Felix Bautista was. He was a guy in low minors who couldn't hit the strike zone and was old as a prospect, pure reliever. And look what they were, and look what they were able to do. Didn't work with Wanderson Charles, the next Felix Bautista potentially, but you're never going to hit 100% on your projects. But I think I'd hate to toot our own horn, but we called year the pitcher and knocked that one out of the park coming into this year. So feel good about that. I think that's a good call.
you guys are both right, and your choices are much more meaningful than mine. But I'm going with Gunnar Henderson's angry bat flips. I love watching those, and I think that's the only thing left in Birdland that everybody can agree on is that is awesome. So I'll go with that.
You stole my answer for the next prompt, which is favorite moment of the year. And I'll just go ahead and say my answer to that was going to be the evolution of the Gunnar Henderson angry walk, bat flip, whole, I don't know what you want to call it, but it was like, I feel like it genuinely started out as him being frustrated because he wants to send every ball to Utah Street. But then I feel like as fans noticed, and then the team noticed that fans noticed, I feel like it became more of a bit. Like Juan Soto's got the shuffle. I feel like we need Gunnar Henderson's angry walk and the bat flips to continue. We need that here. He's got this nice guy reputation, but I feel like there's some asshole there in Gunnar Henderson, and I like to see that shine. So I don't know about you guys' favorite moment, favorite moment of the year.
Yeah, I love that. I think the Orioles released the video with every single one of his angry walks, and the evolution is definitely noticeable. And yeah, he just wants to do damage. Stop walking me. But I will take the on base. But yeah, I'd rather hit bombs. But yeah, my favorite moment, again, early season 2024. Maybe it's not the greatest time when the best things happened before the season started in 2024. But for me, it was the Corbin Burnes trade. I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing. Got the alert from the Discord. Please join, by the way. The link will be in the show notes. At everyone, Orioles just traded for Corbin Burnes. I was half drunk from a nice dinner out, and we hopped on Emergency Podcast, and it was very exciting. Definitely my favorite moment of the season. Also, shout out to Anthony Santander's walk-off home run if you want to get something in the season.
I remember the Corbin Burnes night well because I was actually recording an episode for our prospect countdown when that alert that you're talking about on Discord came through. And I actually stopped in the middle of my recording, made sure that it was true, then went back to finish the recording and then said, by the way, as I was recording this, the Orioles traded for Corbin Burnes. We're going to have an emergency podcast here tonight. Stay tuned for that. So that was fun. I'm going to go with two things that I think kind of stand out in memory. One of them is Jackson Holliday's grand slam against the Blue Jays when he came back up to the major leagues the second time around. And I know that Holliday's rookie season didn't go the way that a lot of people hoped, but that was such a cool moment at the time. And I still have very high hopes for what he's going to do. And another one for me was the second game of the season, 9-run inning against the Angels. That game was a lot of fun to watch. And I know the Angels were terrible, but to see our lineup go off in that inning the way that it did was a lot of fun. And by the way, over the first two games of the year, 24 runs scored against the Angels. And for the better part of 3 months, that was a good omen for how the offense was going to pan out. Unfortunately, it didn't end that way, but early in the year, this lineup was so much fun.
Yeah, if I had a different moment, I think I talked about it before earlier in the year, but it's not very fitting given the recent Corbin Burnes news. But my favorite moment of the year was going to be opening day, just watching Corbin Burnes in an Orioles uniform, and that's an ace. We've got him into first inning, Mike Trout home run, and I was like, that's cute. Okay. It wasn't like, oh, it's over, the dread, oh, here we go again, opening day, season's already over. It was like, that's cute. We got this. And it was cute. It was fun. You got to watch Mike Trout hit a home run off Corbin Burnes, and then the Orioles won. R.I.P. Corbin Burnes, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he diced the Angels up after that home run. That was definitely chill-inducing. Oh, we have an ace. The hope was there right early in the season, and still it was a solid year, 91 wins, and we made the playoffs. My next prompt is, what do we think going into the year was going to be vital to the Orioles' success, but ended up being not quite as important as we thought? Zach?
There's a lot of places I could go with this one. You could look at the bullpen, which wasn't great at times, but in the end, that's not the reason that the Orioles didn't advance in the playoffs. And honestly, after Craig Kimbrell was replaced as closer, wasn't really the reason for their struggles in the second half. So as I think it through, I would say that maybe some of the concerns about Colton Cowser weren't quite valid. You know, there were a lot of people worried about him last year after he struggled in the major leagues. And I think even after spring training, there was a feeling of, well, you've got to have a platoon bat there with him. And if it's not Austin Hayes, it has to be someone else. And Cowser settled in just fine. He finished second Rookie of the Year voting. And as we lamented after the results were announced, he should have won the award. I feel very good about where things are going with his career. And on top of that, his defense. One thing we kept hearing was, can Colton Cowser cover the outfield at Camden Yards? He more than covered it. Gold Glove finalist. Again, that's an award he should have won. So I would say any perceived shortcomings of Colton Cowser.
Great choice.
Yeah, even a lot of people feeling more comfortable about him playing center field when you need him to, which is lovely. I want to go with, I feel like something we talked about so much going into the season, and not just us, but everyone, was like the health of Kyle Bradish and John Means. And it felt like so much of the season was going to depend on those two guys. Like Bradish made a couple starts and they were good. Means made a couple starts. He was good as well. But they go down for the year, and Orioles starting pitchers still ranked 8th in the league in F4 and had the 5th lowest ERA in Major League Baseball last season. Albert Suarez was obviously huge, stepping up. That prospect hoarder that sits out there in the warehouse traded 3 top 30 prospects for Zach Eflin, who was fantastic. Like this, it wasn't the pitching, as we've all talked about, Zach just mentioned, that let this team down the second half of the season. Like it was, you know, the pitching. Cade Povich held his own in his first big league action. Like I mentioned, it's one of the reasons that gives me a lot of hope going into 2025 about what this organization is going to be able to do on the pitching front. But yeah, I like I don't know. I just felt like it was like, oh, if Bradish doesn't come back or if Means can't come back, what is this team going to do? This pitching staff, and granted, a lot of that was Corbin Burns, but this pitching staff still held their own this year.
Yeah, that was going to be mine because, I mean, you couldn't have worse luck when it comes to starting pitching health. Grayson Rodriguez gets hurt. Kyle Bradish, obviously John Means, Tyler Wells, even Cole Irvin ends the year as a free agent or with the Twins or whoever he ended up with. He was not good enough to stay on the roster. But because of the underrated pitching development that the Orioles have, they were able to scrape things together with Albert Suarez, Cade Povich. Let's see, who else? Matt Bowman got a start. That was probably not really a start, but trade for Zach Eflin, and obviously an ace like Corbin Burns can help smooth over any issues you may have in that department. But that's where I think, even if the Orioles don't get a guy at the top of the rotation, a true ace, I still think they're going to get someone. But even if it's just like another 2 or 3 type, like you could slot in the same area as Zach Eflin, the depth that we are going to have going into 2025 with Kyle Bradish set to come back maybe August-ish, Tyler Wells middle of the year, Brandon Young, Chase McDermott, Cade Povich, still have Albert Suarez. I mean, I think they'll find a way to be competitive no matter what.
Now let's look at the flip side of that question, which is, what do we not consider important going into this year, but it ended up being a need? And I'll start with Nick.
Go back to my last answer and probably take the easy one, the low-hanging fruit, and just say Albert Suarez. I don't even see him making the team, I don't think. Just didn't really see him as much of anything. And, 133 innings, 3.70 ERA. As everyone said a million times already, like Albert Suarez was massive for this team. And talking about pitching in 2025, I look forward to Kyle Hart being next year's Albert Suarez. Excuse me, when we don't even land Jack Flaherty. No, but yeah, I'll say Albert Suarez maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, and there's really no way we could have known this was a need whatsoever, but capable veteran depth on the infield. We had a lot of injuries there in that department as well, and who would have thought that Jackson Holliday and Kirby Mayo, well, I mean, I'll say right now, I think they're going to have huge 2025s and establish themselves just like Colton Cowser did in 2024, but they just, especially Jackson Holliday, he got plenty of time, and just while he got better and ended the year finding his stroke, it sounds like, or it seems like that, those were kind of holes in the lineup as Jordan Westberg got hurt, Jorge Mateo got hurt. Luckily, Ramon Urias stepped up. Emmanuel Rivera played pretty well in his time with the Orioles, and I keep forgetting he's still with the Orioles. But yeah, I think maybe trading Connor Norby was a little bit hasty, but again, you just could not expect Jordan Westbrook to go down right afterwards. But that was like the sneaky need that we could have had in AAA that might have helped a little bit.
Yeah, Bob, that's actually was going to be my answer. I fully agree with that. Just to build off of that, I think that more minor league seasoning for Jackson Holliday. We thought at the end of last year that he was really close to being big league ready and that he might be big league ready by opening day. He had a pretty good spring training. We thought, again, he was going to make the opening day roster. He didn't. He goes back to AAA. He comes back up after a very short stint, and it's like, all right, he's arrived. He's going to prove it. And he really struggled. Now, I will say that I think he had a really short leash when he came up the first time around, and he was under a lot of pressure. There was more attention around him than I think there has been, certainly around any Orioles prospect in a long time. But it was clear when you saw him the second time around, even though he struggled a little bit, that he was a more prepared player the second time. The first time, there were times that he looked lost at the plate, and I don't know that it would have been much better if, to put it this way, I think that going down the minor leagues, maybe it didn't look like the stat line changed a whole lot because he didn't hit well in his second stint either, but the quality of at bats were better. He really caught fire at the end of the year, and the defense was really good. But I think that more minor league seasoning probably was needed for Holliday, and ideally, maybe if the Orioles could do it over again, he would have stayed in AAA for the first 3.5 months of the year, then come up to the majors.
He should have instituted the Shohei toe tap way earlier because that is a game changer.
All right, so now we go to usually this is Zach's show. This question here, this prompt. Some of the more epic rants I feel like on this show have come from this prompt. But worst Orioles take of the year that you guys have seen. What do you guys got this year?
There are so many directions that I could go in with this, and I had second thoughts about this take, and I even said to you guys, like, hey, is this actually still valid before we went on the air tonight? Because when this article was first published, I saw it and thought that is what it's going to be in this segment at the end of the year when we talk about what was the worst Orioles take. And is it analysis over Fangraphs? No. Is it analysis about something that happened at the trade deadline? No. Is it a prospect ranking? No. It's an article at Sports Illustrated from Tyler Marr with the headline, Baltimore Orioles owner stuns fans with ridiculous antics. Now, before you question what is Tyler talking about, it could be any number of things other than what it actually was, which is David Rubenstein getting on the dugout during the seventh inning stretch and dancing with the Oriole bird while Thank God I'm a Country Boy plays. Now, anyone who's been to an Orioles game has seen this. They'll pull a random fan up and they'll dance with the mascot, and it's a nice, 90-second thing, and then it's over. Anyone who saw that night had the same thought of, oh, look, the owner's up there doing it. No harm, no foul. That was kind of nice. But Tyler apparently got a little worked up about it. And here's the best part of the whole article. Quote, he high-fived fans while dancing to the John Denver classic, Thank God I'm a Country Boy, throughout the seventh inning stretch, despite being an absurdly wealthy city boy. And if that wasn't enough, he also threw out souvenir hats to fans in the crowd. First of all, the audacity to throw out hats to people. But secondly, we get the fact that song is being danced to, or, people are clapping along to Thank God I'm a Country Boy when they're in the middle of a ballpark in a major city. Do you think any of those people were cooking breakfast on the skillet outside their barn before they went to the Orioles game? I bet you very few of them were. So, yes, we get it. Thank God I'm a Country Boy is a thing. David Rubenstein is from Baltimore. He lives somewhere in the wealthy D.C. suburbs now. He's not a country boy. Most of the people who are standing there clapping along to that song in the middle of the seventh inning stretch don't live on a farm. If they do, great. Good for them. I'm glad it's their game. But if you live somewhere not on a farm and you're dancing that song, you're not some absurdly wealthy city boy that gets taken down on SI. You're just an Orioles fan having a good time.
That again, this is we can never stop doing this this part of the show every year. I love it. Mine is going to be, I don't listen to this guy's radio show because why the hell would you? But he's out there making casual Oriole fans dumber by the second. It's Jason La Canfora. He's just a pathetic human being who has a radio show. It's embarrassing that he still is on air in Baltimore. I mean, this is a guy that goes to minor league games, gets prospects to sign baseball cards, and then flips them on eBay for profit. As a quote-unquote journalist and person in this industry, he also has to profusely, pathetically apologize to Mike Elias before the interview on the radio because of all the ridiculous tweets that he's put out there. Just, why can't he just go bug another fan base and pretend that he's one of them before he tears down every single thing they do?
This is why I leave it to you guys to answer that one, because those about hit it. My answer is going to be short and sweet and let you guys just rant about that. And I was just going to go, because this is terrible podcasting, to go with an inside joke, but I was just going to go out with the growth plates, take Kobe Mayo's growth plates not being fully formed as to why he sucked when he came up to the major leagues. But oh man, reminiscing about those takes. We need to create a list and we need a thread going, like an internal on our internal doc. We need to keep a thread of all the best ones moving forward, and maybe just do a full episode. Turn this question into a full episode that we do at the end of the year that we release with this. But
new Discord channel is going to be available very shortly.
All right, so we'll go with Bob for the next
sorry.
one.
I was too much enjoying the answers to that question. Biggest pleasant surprise when it comes to prospect in 2024, Nick?
I went with going back to the pitching well and gonna go with Nestor Herman, like just the literal unknown among pitching prospects, not just in the system, but he's really now entering 2025, a prospect with a lot of helium, not just among Orioles fans and people who follow the system, but nationally as well. When you've got, and I'm just like reading off Baseball America's article that they had at the end of the year here, 5-pitch mix, 85th percentile or better in whiff rate on all 5 offerings. He's averaging 94 miles per hour now with the fastball because he saw a velo bump this year. The slider increased like 3 miles per hour. It's getting into that nice, healthy, like 86, 88 mile per hour range. I don't know the answer to this, so I'm genuinely curious when I ask this. How many pitching prospects in baseball have 5 pitches that all grade out at above average or better? I don't think it's many. And the best part of all this, he was an 11th round draft pick out of Seattle. I know they got Tariq Skubal. They produced him as well. So he's not like the OG from Seattle, but an 11th round draft pick. He was fun to watch in Delmarva, missed over a month, was even more fun to watch in high A. I'm pretty stoked to see what he can do. Obviously, I don't know if he's going to start the year in Double A, but I am pretty stoked to see what he can do this year once he does get to Double A and faces his next big real test.
I'm going to stick with the pitching theme here and go with Keeler Morphe. Morphe had made his debut in 2023 as a 17-year-old, did not have a good year at all in the Dominican Summer League. He goes back, and Morphe was not a guy that we knew a whole lot about. He wasn't a high signing bonus guy. And although Fangraphs' Eric Longenhagen did shout him out pretty early in the year, he wasn't getting a lot of traction nationally either. And yet he goes back to the DSL this year, absolutely dominates, and then bypasses the FCL and ends the year in Delmarva. And I had the fortune of seeing one of Morphe's starts at the end of the year. He's one of the youngest guys on the field. He's 18 years old. He's a smaller guy, as you can tell from his height weight listing right now at 5'8" and 161. I don't know how accurate that is, but he's got such a good mound presence. He throws hard. He's got 2 pitches that he's developing right now. It's a fastball, a changeup, and a slider. You know the Orioles certainly can and will do more with him from the development standpoint. But to go from not really being on the prospect radar at all to now being basically a consensus top 20 at worst, top 30 prospect in the system, he took a huge step forward. And I don't know, frankly, that many people saw it coming.
No, to skip the FCL was pretty mind-blowing at the time. We hadn't seen it yet to that point under the Orioles. But I'm going to shout out Trey Gibson before I get to my actual pick, just because he deserves it. Undrafted free agent from the 2023 draft, following that draft out of, what was it, Fake School Liberty or whatever.
Diploma Mill U.
But he, I just thought, how the Orioles have all these undrafted free agent. He's a pitcher that's going to fill out, the bullpen in the lower minors. And no, he's going to come into 2024 and end up as a legit pitching prospect, one of the better ones in the system, potentially. And his stock is rising through the roof right now. So shout out to him. But my pleasant surprise is Brandon Young, just because coming back from injury, second Tommy John, I would have just been happy even if he just would have pitched most of the year in Double-A and got better as the year went on, maybe ended the year in Triple-A and had a chance in 2025 to make his major league debut by the end of the year. But instead, he spends a month or two in Double-A, pitches really well, gets promoted to Triple-A and pitches even better throughout the year, ends up throwing a bunch of innings, and is a borderline top 100 prospect according to some people, and is banging on the door. A potential surprise rotation candidate out of breaking camp opening day? Probably not, but he will make his major league debut in 2025, and I would imagine at least a handful of starts for the Orioles this coming season. So Brandon Young really killed it coming out of rehab.
All good choices. Now we're going to go to the opposite end of the spectrum. What was the biggest prospect disappointment of the year? And I'll start with Bob on that one.
I have pitchers again here, two pitchers. Teddy Sharkey, just because I was so excited to see him charge through the system out of the bullpen, but injuries kind of derailed his season. But Justin Armbruster coming into 2024 was like, he's right there with Povich and McDermott as a guy that's going to be at least be able to 8 innings and maybe have some starts in the majors. But instead, he just, I know the Orioles like his stuff, but it just did not. It was just a lost year for Armbruster. Maybe he can make up for it in 2025, but he was a guy that came up through the system. Justin Orr guy, we made fun of it because he performed so well all the way up until last year. Unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be. Hopefully he can regroup and bounce back in 2025, but that was pretty disappointing for me.
Yeah, I was going to go with an outfielder. I had Armbruster on my finalist list here. I had another outfielder, but I'm going to switch mine last second here. And I'm going to go with Jake Cunningham. I'm going to stick with it. Just because I loved watching this guy when he was at Charlotte. I was ecstatic when the Orioles drafted him. You felt even better when you had Brad Selick come out and talk about the way he talked about Cunningham after the draft, obviously calling him the tool shed, feeling like he was ranked much higher on the Orioles board. And so he fell to them. They got a couple rounds of value there on Cunningham. And he started off, that draft year, he got to Delmarva and, he's hitting opposite field home runs. He's robbing home runs. He's got a 119 WRC plus. Like he's doing this in his draft year when he was hurt most of the year, his final year at Charlotte. And you felt really good going into 2024. And then this year was just not good. Like clearly he checked some boxes because he got promoted to high A at the end of the year. But you look at his time in Delmarva, like it was more injuries. It was like a 91 WRC plus, I think. Very little power. But then he gets to Aberdeen and you're like, all right, don't understand this promotion at all. He hits 285 in a very small sample size when he was with Aberdeen. And as we've talked about before, it was mostly singles, but that made me feel a little bit better. Like, okay, at least he's making contact now in high A. He got promoted. There's a reason he got promoted. It wasn't just to make room for, draft picks and more international guys. I feel like if the Orioles didn't think he deserved the promotion, they would just leave him on the bench down in Delmarva or put him on the development list or something. I feel like he earned a promotion by some metric. And even if it was just singles in those 10 or 12 games he played, you felt good. He goes to the Arizona Fall League and rakes. He played, 6 games? He hit like, I don't even know what it was. I don't have the number here. He hit some ungodly amount, like 400 something, I think, in the Arizona Fall League with a pair of home runs in 6 games. Was playing extremely well. But then after those 6 games, we never hear from him. And I don't know if you guys heard anything or know anything else, but I don't think it was ever said publicly why he stopped playing. He just disappeared. And so now here we are. We're left. He's going to be 24 this season, I think middle of summer. 23, 24 years old, probably going to be stuck in high A again unless he can come out of the gates hot and have this strong, consistent season this year. It was frustrating because I think we had some pretty high hopes for Jake Cunningham coming out of the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I had him as high as the late teens in my personal prospect rankings, and man, came crashing down pretty fast this year.
I was torn between two guys, one of them being Max Wagner for the spot. This was 2024 was just a really tough year for him. Couldn't stay on the field much because of injuries, and when he was on the field, didn't really produce at the level you would like to see. And I keep in mind that Wagner is still on the younger side of prospects. I think he'll be 23 next year and should be at Bowie if he's healthy. So there is time for him, but we also know with how the Orioles target college bats in the draft that you can easily get surpassed in this system if you're missing time because of injuries. But the guy I'm going to go with just leads us on a roller coaster of emotions every year, and it's Carlos Tavera. And the reason that I went with Tavera for this spot is not so much because of my expectations for him coming into the year, but it's how he managed to increase my expectations for him during the season. We've known all along who Tavera is as a prospect. The guy with really good stuff, but serious command issues. And when it rains, it pours. So you know you're going to have those outings in there that are just clunkers, sandwiched in the middle of his really dominant outings. He went back to Bowie to start 2024, and it looks like he had kind of ironed out some of those issues. His command was much better than it had been really at any point in his professional career. And he manages to get a promotion in Norfolk in early June, and it was ugly for him there when he got moved up. And although he got a taste of Norfolk again at the end of the year and actually ended the season on the high note with 5 shutout innings against Durham, the overall AAA numbers are ugly. 7.47 ERA and 47 innings pitched. That goes with a 7.19 FIP, 6.44 xFIP. And I think the most concerning thing of all, walk rate of nearly 16% with a strikeout rate right around 18%. We have become accustomed to pitchers going up to AAA and seeing their command regress because of the adjustment to the baseball and the automated ball strike zone. And we've seen pitchers give up more home runs. And that's why we try to hedge sometimes when we talk about expectations for a guy going from AA to AAA to say, he could still be pitching really well, but these things are going to look worse in the stat line. I can't really find a silver lining for Tavera in his AAA performance. And I know he's pitched really well in Mexico this winter, but I'm not ready to declare that the beginning of a turnaround.
No, I mean, it's cool that he can have some success in winter ball, but yeah, got to see it in the real deal at AAA if we're going to buy into it.
You mean pitching prospects can fail? They're not all great? What? That's what On the Verge was here to do. Anyway, Samuel Basallo. Here's a fun topic. Samuel Basallo. He is this year's poster boy for the question, great prospect or the greatest prospect, Bob?
Greatest prospect ever since last year. No, I love Samuel Basallo, and the more you hear about him, the more you see him play, the more articles you read about him, John Mioli shout out, the more excited you get, just because, God, is there a bad thing to be said about him as far as development at his age and his talent level? And man, I'm so excited to see him make the major leagues and really put the Orioles international player development system on the map and get him be the first international star, homegrown star for the Orioles, and draw even more international talent. It's kind of a cycle, and it took a while to get to this point for the Orioles. 2019, you bring in Kobe Perez and company, and by the end of 2025, you might see the first fruits of your labor. But it's a juicy fruit. Sammy Basayo is one juicy fruit.
The greatest prospect since Jackson Holiday. Everything that Bob just said is true, and I think I think that Basayo is going to have a huge year in 2025. I really do, and I know that there's question marks still about the defense, but he's making progress in those areas. And what he shows at the plate to me is not just someone who has a lot of power. He's a very complete hitter. He's had good walk rates wherever he's been in the minor leagues. He can make good contact. It's not all home runs and strikeouts with Basayo. There's real promise here. So great prospect.
Yeah, I'm gonna clip the juicy fruit comment. But I'm gonna say great prospect. I don't know if this is fair or not. I don't care about the defense. Like I really don't. I'd just be serviceable behind the plate on a part-time basis, and I'm fine with that. It is that bat that is going to carry him. And yeah, the reason I would say great prospect versus greatest prospect is because, yeah, if you move him to first, if he's primarily first base DH, sure, he's going to lose some value. Versus if he were to stick behind the plate, of course. But, hopefully you've got Adley here for a long time behind the plate, and Basayo doesn't need to be that guy behind the plate. So, and the defense is improving. And again, if you go back and look at when Baseball America released their updated top 10 list, and John Miali, who wrote that list, did a chat over there. And of course, there were a lot of questions about Basayo, a lot of good questions, a lot of fair, valid questions. And John, of course, had a lot of great responses and things he's been told from the organization, things he's been told from other scouts outside the organization as well, which is why I respect his opinion so much. He's not just taking what the Orioles tell him and running with it. It was the fact that some of the things he said in that chat about what Basayo does as a hitter, as Zach alluded to, like the guy, basically the way John put it was that Basayo sometimes when you would see him struggle or some of his flaws or because he's almost too smart of a baseball player. It's because when he sees somebody, when he goes up against a pitcher, he has the mind of an elephant. He does not forget. He remembers the sequencing that he had against that pitcher before, even if it was 2-3 months ago. He remembers what the ball looked like out of this guy's hand. He knows what this guy's curveball looks like, what his fastball does, et cetera, et cetera. And so he gets a little bit too aggressive and, we'll chase a pitch out of the zone or something because he's too confident sometimes. He's cerebral in everything he does. He's a fun personality. I hope, look, you can compliment to Yordan Alvarez. I know that's an easy comp. It's a fun comp. I hope it's true. Again, the internal kind of models projecting a potential 40 home run a year, a guy who hits for what did John say, like 280 average or something as well on top of that. So again, like Zach said, it's not just home run or nothing. It's not a 3 true outcome player. He's got speed. He's athletic as well. He's sneaky athletic, especially over at first base. I really do. I know, I agree with Bob's take. He's been pushing this for a while. Like, could Basayo be one of the first big extension guys? I hope it is, just because it's risky, sure, but man, that would make such a huge statement to give that to Sammy Basayo. And I hope he does have a massive year in AAA this year. And I don't need to see him in the majors this year. I'm cool with slow playing this and making sure he's fully ready. But if it's 2026, then it's going to be 2026. I hope that true breakout is there, because this is personality wise. It's not just what he does on the field as a baseball player. His personality, I think people who haven't seen him are going to just absolutely fall in love with this guy. You pair him up with a Colton Cowser and some others. They say Jordan Westburg doesn't smile. I think it's going to be hard for even a guy like Jordan Westburg not to be smiling every night in that Orioles clubhouse.
Yep. And we'll probably have the same question next year because Basayo will most likely still be rookie or prospect eligible. But let's get to a fun exercise we do around this time every year and predict our top 10 Orioles prospects for this time next year. Zach?
So I think it's going to be a pitching heavy top 10. I think Trey Gibson will be right there in the 10 spot, followed by Keeler Morphe at 9, and then Nestor Herman at 8. Whoever the Orioles pick with their 18th pick in the draft this year, will come in at number 7. And then I think you will have Dylan Beavers 6, Judd Fabian 5th. Then I'll go Michael Ferret 4, Enrique Bradfield Jr. 3, Vance Honeycutt 2, and Samuel Basayo 1.
Like it. I've got Samuel Basayo 1, Vance Honeycutt 2, Enrique Bradfield 3, Michael Ferret 4. I think I made this bold prediction earlier. I'm going to say Steven Martinez 5. I'm going bold here. Why not? 2025 draft pick number 6. Keeler Morphe number 7. Nestor Herman 8. 2025 draft pick number 9. We could trade some of those picks. I think Sterling mentioned it at the top of the show in the comments. You could trade one of these picks for a starter, but let's assume the Orioles have 9 picks in the top 10 next year at the rate. Another 2025 draft pick, and then number 10. I wanted to put Trey Gibson here, but you know what? He's a guy who, honestly, I don't feel very confident in my assessment of him. I want to watch him a lot more this coming year, but I'm going to say number 10. Patrick Riley. I feel like I know a lot of people are already tagged him as the sleeper in the system and are super pumped to see him. I don't know. I just have this feeling about Patrick Riley, and I'm pretty stoked. I need to really sit down and watch him next year, but I think Riley's going to be a really fun addition to the system.
I agree with that. And we have pretty similar top 5s because I have Sammy Basayo 1, Vance Honeycutt 2, Enrique Bradfield 3, Michael Ferret 4, Keeler Morphe 5, draft pick 6, Dylan Beaver 7, Nestor Herman 8, Creed Willems 9, Leandro Arias 10. So I see Leandro Arias being the guy that kind of, him or Aaron Estrada being a guy that just continues to improve and develop all the way up to AA.
What are your bold predictions for 2025? And I'll start with Bob on this one.
I said, with all the worrying that the Orioles are ruining their golden opportunity, this is our window. No, I think the idea is to have a wide open window for a decade plus. So I think despite all the worrying on Orioles Twitter, I think the Orioles will end up 2025 with a top 5 offense in all of baseball and a top 10 pitching staff in all of baseball. And also, I think we will see the first long-term extension signed before opening day this year. Favorite's got to be Adley, but I think it's going to be Colton Cowser. I think maybe you see an 8-year deal signed by Colton Cowser, and I would love to have that personality in the clubhouse and that glove and bat roaming the outfield for the next 8 years, like I said.
I have a small list here. I'm going to say Chase McDermott gets the most Rookie of the Year votes among eligible Orioles players. And yes, I know Kobe Mayo is eligible. Jordan Westberg is a top 10 MVP candidate. That might be very bold, but you know what? Had some great numbers last year. Zach Eflin gets an extension with the Orioles. That's wish casting. I would just love to see that. I'm going to say the Orioles win the AL East. I already put up money. Put my money where my mouth is on that one. Already laid the bet down a couple days ago on that one. I think it was with the Corbin Burns news. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. So I say the Orioles do win the AL East, and I'm going to say that the Orioles pitcher who leads the team in F4 next year is Sandy Alcantara. Those are my. I was going to say Ranger Suarez. I wanted to go a little bit off the radar, like that's the guy who comes out of nowhere and the Orioles trade for. But I think I just saw that he's a Scott Boras client now, and he's entering a contract year. And he's going to get a big bag as long as he stays healthy. So I'm going away from that. And I'm going to say, get the guy with a couple more years of control. Sandy Alcantara is the guy in the Orioles uniform leading the way in 2025.
So you're calling not just Sandy Alcantara to the Orioles, but return to Cy Young form, Sandy Alcantara.
Close to it, at least. I think he's going to lead the way. I think you got Alcantara, Grayson, Zach Eflin is your top three. One of the top, I don't know, top 6, top 7, top 8 rotations in all of baseball, led by those three guys.
Garrett's going to like that answer.
I'm going to go top 7 Cy Young finish for Grayson Rodriguez. A lot of people forget that Rodriguez was taking really significant steps forward last year. You look across the board, in just about every area, Rodriguez took a significant step forward from the way he pitched in 2023. Strikeouts were up, walks were down. He seemed to be doing a much better job of preventing the big inning, which had been an issue for him during his rookie season. Everything was going in the right direction up until that injury. And I don't know that it would have done a lot different for the Orioles season. I still think the biggest what if in the injury department is Jordan Westburg. But you have to think that their rotation would have been a lot more dangerous down the stretch had Rodriguez been in it. And this is someone that was believed by many to be a possible ace in the future. And while I'm not so confident in Rodriguez that I don't believe the Orioles need to go out and get another ace, I still think Rodriguez is going to become that guy. And this year is going to mark the year where he takes the biggest step towards becoming a legitimate top of the rotation starter. So we know that guys tend to kind of get lowered a little bit, I think, when they're younger, and it's the first time they're in Cy Young consideration. We saw that with Kyle Braddis a few years ago. So I don't think that Rodriguez is going to be a finalist, but I could see him getting enough votes that you look and he's somewhere in the 5 to 7 range in Cy Young voting.
Well, all right. Favorite non-baseball things of 2024. I can't remember if we had specific topics for this one or not, or we'll go with Bob to answer it if first he can lead the way here with it.
All right, yeah. Last year it was more specific, but this year I changed it to just non-baseball things because, yeah, I guess not everybody keeps lists of all the movies, TV shows, books they read, and let's just say I love spreadsheets, but and lists. But the best TV shows that I watched in 2024, I would say, would be Industry on HBO, Shogun on Hulu/FX, and Ripley on Netflix. So recommend those shows to anyone out there. I haven't seen a lot of movies the past couple of years, but my favorite movies of 2024 that I've seen: Dune Part 2, which I think is just a great blockbuster epic based on the science fiction novel. Rebel Ridge was another favorite of mine, a nice action thriller on Netflix. And I read 180 books in 2024, so these are the top 10 books that I read this year. Number 1 is Toll the Hounds. It's book 8 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is a 10-book series. This represents the whole series. It's one of the best fantasy series ever written by Steven Erikson. Number 2, The Count of Monte Cristo, Bobby Jones. You know what I'm talking about. Number 3, In Cold Blood. Number 4, The Shadow of the Torturer. 5, Piranesi. 6, James, which is the best book that was released in 2024 as well. 7, Speaker for the Dead. 8, the classic Bram Stoker's Dracula. 9, Why We Sleep. It's a non-fiction book, the only one on this list. And number 10 was The Trespasser by Tana French.
I'll just say we got a posthumous Russell Banks release. I thought that when he passed away and the Magic Kingdom was released shortly before his death, that would be the last work we had from him. But nope, we got American Spirits. It was excellent. I think it's among some of the best in his canon. So happy we got that 2024.
Again, I've read one book in the last 5 years, and it took me 3 years to read it. The last movie that I watched that wasn't on Disney Plus or something my kids wanted to watch religiously, I think was the live action or the remake to Aladdin. I think that was one of the last dates my wife and I had before our oldest son was born. I'm going to go, if we're just leaving this more generic and saying favorite non-baseball things in 2024, we usually don't get very personal on the show. We stick to baseball and prospects and such. 2024 is probably what it was like the worst year of my life, I think, personally, up to this point. Which, when you zoom out, is it's a blessing that I can say this is the worst year of my life. But so I'm just gonna say, like, my kids. I learned a lot about, they're what, 2 and 5, and really taking a step back and like watching them and enjoying them was my favorite non-baseball thing in 2024, because things happened this year that made you really stop and think about what's important in life. And yeah, starting to realize that a little bit more this year.
Yeah, I can definitely co-sign that as well. Going through the severe pneumonia, and there was other things in 2024 that was just like, is this really happening? Hopefully 2025 is better on that account. But yeah, have the 1-year-old at home, and it's being able to appreciate the third kid when maybe you took the first two for granted, but they're older and still having fun with them as well. So good call. It's me, isn't it? The last question here. I X'd out of the spreadsheet. New Year's resolutions for the podcast, or for, the Orioles or baseball in general. Let's go back to Nick.
Well, my non-baseball resolution would be to read these freaking books behind me. They're all history related, and when I stopped teaching history, it fell off. But maybe this will be the year. For baseball and the podcast, man, the podcast has been in such a great spot. We're about to we're about to have our 5th anniversary. I don't know if you guys realize that. 5 years is insane. It is literally, this podcast started before the pandemic, so it has been like 3 lifetimes, I feel like, since we started the show, and we are here pretty much every single week. I know I've missed a lot of episodes. Bob missed a lot of episodes. I don't think Zach's missed one. He has been the first voice you hear on every single episode we've done, pretty much.
Good.
I don't know. Of course, the podcast stuff, we usually say like more guests, and it would be cool to get more players again next year. Hopefully we can overcome some barriers to that again. But I'm going to add like the writing as an extension of the podcast, just because I got that itch again in early November, and it's been good, consistent over at Substack, and the growth over there has been amazing. The podcast allows us to highlight kind of, I feel like, high level things. And occasionally we do get opportunities to dive into like specific topics and spend an hour just talking about one specific thing. And, we've got the social media accounts with the videos and the stats and everything, but I don't know. I got the itch. It hasn't gone away, because that's where, I don't know. I feel like all 3 of us, that's where we got our start in all of this, was writing. As mine was like back in like 2017, writing about Orioles prospects. And so it's been fun to get back on the writing side of things. And so I think for me, it's going to be, of course, it's not my Substack. It's the podcast Substack, where all 3 of us will have articles up there. Sign up for it. We're not going to flood your inbox. We'll make sure we plan accordingly, so we have like 5 articles a week going out. But I'm excited to, take topics we touch on in the show, or take prospects that, hey, nobody's talking about this guy, and getting more information and being able to go deeper on these prospects and such, or topics. And using that Substack as an extension of the podcast to help the whole operation we have going on here grow in 2025.
Very good answer.
So I have a 3-pronged answer. One for the Orioles, win a playoff series, just get over that hump. I know that with this team, when they get over that hump, you're not going to stop them. So my feeling on the Orioles in 2025 is basically, when it comes to the playoffs, all or nothing. They're either going to win the first round and root to a World Series title, or they're going to get bounced in the first round again. It's going to be one of those 2 things. But New Year's resolution for the Orioles is to get over that hump. For the podcast, it's for myself, and that is to not let things that I see in the background slip until it's too late. Because early this year, we were doing an episode, and I saw an Arizona Cardinals helmet behind Nick. And I was so confused, because Nick is a Cowboys fan who lives in Virginia. And I don't even think the guy who roots for the Arizona Cardinals has an Arizona Cardinals helmet in his office. But yet Nick had one, and I was going to bring it up on the air, didn't. And then Nick moved some things around in his office, and now the helmet is gone. And are you grabbing it for us?
There he is.
All right, so there's a helmet. There's an Arizona Cardinals helmet in Nick's office. And for Orioles fans, it's fine to criticize the team. It's fair game, but stop with the conspiracy theories. Stop with, does Hyde like this guy better because he's in the lineup when I think that he shouldn't be? Stop taking excerpts of books out of context, putting up pictures of them on social media to talk about prospect hoarding, which is not a thing. The Orioles have traded now over a dozen prospects in the last 2 years. It's not a thing. Just stop with it. Look, there's criticisms that are fair game, but the conspiracy theory stuff has to stop. You're making yourself miserable. You're making other Orioles fans miserable. Just stop with it.
No
Yes,
more
Simpkin. Yes.
No more one
Frontline.
source journalism out there as
Oh,
well. That would be great as well.
Yeah, that would be nice. I went strictly around the podcast. I just think, I mean, we're pretty much a well-oiled machine at this point with the content, but I think we could be better about. We could have a merch store. We have the stuff. We just have to get it all together. The YouTube, I feel like we could spice it up a little bit, get a better logo up in here. That's coming soon. I know none of us love self-promotion, but I feel like we could get ourselves out in front of more eyeballs if we put our mind to it. And that's my goal for 2025 is to just spruce up the little things on the outside of the podcast rather than, I mean, we know what we're doing when we're talking about Orioles, but yeah, Matt Winter, help us out, brother.
And that does it for Orioles on the Verge 2024. We will be back next week with our first news shows of the new year. We'll figure out what we're going to talk about between now and then. In the meantime, you can follow us on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky. We're also over at Substack, which Nick mentioned earlier. You can find that at oriolesontheverge.substack.com. We are going to have a few perks as we get deeper into the offseason for our Substack subscribers, so be sure to be on the lookout for those. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member today. And now is the best time to do it because we are just about a week away from starting our top 50 prospects countdown. It's a great time to get into the door, gear up for the 2025 season, and then we'll have more bonus coverage for you over at Patreon, as well as a bunch of other perks throughout the 2025 season. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.